Welcome to the Office of Assessments and Office of Accountability Annual Fall Updates. We are going to get started. My name is Sarah Dunn. I'm with the Office of Assessments, and I wanted to say before we get into all the information, I have dropped in the chat a PDF with links to some of the websites we'll be talking about. Additionally, there's a QR code on this slide that you can scan. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat. There are members of the Office of Assessments on this call, and they will answer them as we go along. And we will also have a Q&A at the end of my presentation. So let's get started. Maybe. All right, there we go. So the agenda for today, we are going to first do some assessment updates, and then we'll take a small break, and then we will move into the accountability updates, and those will be led by the Director of Data Literacy, Lisa Rohr, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. So first off, we're just going to give a basic overview. The whole reason why we do state testing, it's due to the federal law of ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and with that, we have part of the law is that we're required to test 95% of students, and that's tied to our Title I funding from the federal government, and that only 1% of our student population can take the an alternative test, or in Oklahoma, that's the OAP, the Oklahoma Alternative Assessment Program. And there are lots of acronyms. It took me a long time to learn them. So if I use an acronym and you guys don't know what it is, please put that in the chat and we will answer that. Other states may assess other subjects or grade levels, but for us in Oklahoma, what we test are in grades 3 through 8, we test ELA and math, and then we test ELA and math once in high school, grades 9 through 12. In science, the federal law requires we assess science once in grades 3 through 5, and that's our 5th grade science test, once in grades 6 through 9, which is our 8th grade science test, and once in grades 10 through 12, which is our 11th grade CCRA science content assessment. And these assessments are tied directly back to the Oklahoma academic standards. So part of ESSA was that we adopt new standards. So back in 2015, 2016, we moved away from PASS and the PASS scale. We moved to the Oklahoma academic standards. And so the OSTP tests and the CCRA are aligned directly to those standards. This is a diagram that we have that shows all of the subject tests that each grade level takes. It's posted to our website on our announcements, the SDE assessments webpage. It's under announcements, and then when we post the slides, this image is also hyperlinked so you can click on it and it will take you right to our webpage. Next, we have the second page of that document on our webpage that is our testing calendar. So some things I wanted to note about this is that, as we all know, testing was canceled in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We received that waiver from the USDE, and in 2020 we had intended on moving the testing window for grades 3 through 8 back later in the school year. And we're going to continue with that this year in 2020. So grades 3 through 8, their testing window will begin April 20th and end May 17th. And then additionally, for college and career readiness, though, the grade 11 test, that is going to stay at the beginning of April. So testing might be stretched out a bit longer this year, but hopefully it will be easier to get it all organized now that we have 3 through 8 moved back in the school year. Another thing I wanted to note that is a big shift for 2021, this spring's administration, is that all of our assessments will be online. Last year in 2020, we had intended on moving grade 3 math online, and then this year moving grade 3 ELA online. Since we received the assessment waiver for 2020, for 2021, we will move both grade 3 math and ELA to be an online test. Paper pencil tests will still be available, but those paper pencil tests will only be available for students with a documented accommodation and an IEP, a 504, or an ELAP, an English Learner Academic Plan. On this schedule, also, you'll see at the bottom that we have WIDA test dates, NAEP test dates, and the test window for the OAP, or the Oklahoma Alternative Assessment Program. All right. Moving right along. So this is an important notice that I wanted to call out. It's also going to be in our test administration manuals and in our test preparation manual. With the cancellation of 2020 tests, we were all ready to go as an office. Everything was prepared and printed, and our testing vendor Cognia was ready to ship all these materials out, and then the pandemic happened. So in order to conserve funds, our office decided to reuse these paper materials that we already had ready. So if you have students who have a paper pencil accommodation and you're shipped test materials, so test booklets, answer documents, and they say 2020 on them, this is not an error. It's supposed to say 2020. It will be for the 2021 administration, but they will have the 2020 date on them. Okay, sorry, I got accidentally muted, guys, but I'm back. I'm ready to tell you some more good news about assessments. So this information about scheduling tests can be found on the key dates document posted to the Oklahoma Help and Support site that is run by Cognia, our testing vendor. I've linked to it, and then also in the document I put in the chat, there's a link to the help and support site. So some important dates I wanted to call out would be to receive early RSA reporting. So reporting for whether third grade ELA meets the RSA criteria. We need to have those tests completed and submitted online by April 23rd. And that is a very short window because the testing window opens on the 20th. So April 23rd for those. If they're turned in after that date, they'll still receive scores and they'll still receive RSA scores, but it just won't be for the early RSA reporting window that those scores will be sent back to districts. Additionally, to receive preliminary score reports for grades 4 through 8 ELA, we need those tests completed online by April 30th. And then to receive final reporting for grades 5 and 8 writing, we need those turned in and completed by April 30th as well. One reason why these dates are sooner than the end of the testing window is that for our ELA tests, we have for 5th and 8th grade, the essay or extended constructed response or writing prompt. It goes by many names. And that takes a lot of time and manpower to score. Additionally, for grades 3 and grades 3, 4, 6, and 7, we have short constructed response, which are short answer questions, and those take extra time to score as well. So that is why these dates are a little bit sooner than the end of the window. A new thing that we have this year, since we have moved all online, is we've consolidated the shipping process to return the paper materials. It used to be in 3 phases, and now it is only in 2 phases. The first phase will be to return all of the grade 3 materials. In that, Cognia has scheduled for your districts a pickup date of April 27th. If you want to have a sooner pickup date, you can do that. You schedule that in the OSTP portal, but it needs to be done prior to April 23rd. The second phase is where we consolidated the old second and third phase. So it's all scoreable and non-scoreable materials will now be shipped back together. So that would be answer documents and test booklets will get shipped back together for phase 2. The date that Cognia has scheduled to have UPS come to your districts and pick those up is May 6th. But if you want to schedule an earlier date, you can do that. It just needs to be done by April 30th. And once again, if I'm going through this quickly, all of these dates can be found on the key dates document posted to the Oklahoma Help and Support site. Next, I wanted to talk about our WIDA testing window. So this is for our EL students, and that window will be January 11th through March 26th of 2021. One thing about that is that just like with our OSTP test, WIDA does have a Precode window where they pull all of the EL student information from the WAVE, and that pull will happen on December 1st of this year. So I would ask that you guys please make sure you have your student information correct for your EL students by December 1st of 2021 when that, or excuse me, 2020, not next year, this year, when that information is pulled. If you have any questions about WIDA or access testing, please contact our Office of English Language Proficiency. They are the go-to ones when it comes to WIDA, access, EL. They know the things. I have the phone number here. You can also email them as well. Our next topic is NAEP. NAEP is our national test. It is required by federal law, and our director of NAEP is Rebecca Logan. She's the director of national and international assessments here at the State Department. She recently has sent out a notification to district superintendents and site principals who were selected to administer the NAEP for the 28th. So you should be aware if you were selected to administer the NAEP. If you have any questions about it or are unsure if you were selected, feel free to shoot Rebecca Logan an email. She will answer all of your questions there. With the craziness that is COVID-19 and the pandemic, the National Center for Educational Statistics is looking to figure out the best ways to administer the NAEP. So they are exploring the possibility to send out an online survey and a questionnaire and to work with schools on administering the NAEP. So be on the lookout for that. And like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out to Rebecca Logan. She can answer all of those. And I'm fairly certain she is on the call today. If you have any NAEP questions, you can also drop them in the chat right now. This page links to our OAP webpage for the State Department, and it is just full of resources. So the OAP has a different testing vendor than the OSTP. It is run by Dynamic Learning Maps, or KITE, out of the University of Kansas, and our state website that's dedicated to the OAP has tons of resources and information from getting you started on calendars, what tests to give, what's required of test administrators, and links to the DLM portal. So now I'm going to move into some more grade level specific updates. And so we'll start with grades 3 through 8. The first thing I wanted to highlight was our parent portal. It's not necessarily an update. We've had it for a while. It's been available, but I think it's really important because we no longer send out paper reports to schools to send home with parents. So all parents can access their students' scores, and students can access their own scores as well through our online parent portal. The nice thing about this is that if you have a student and let's say they've taken the grade 8 test and the preliminary scores are in or final scores are in and they log on, not only will they be able to see their students' grade 8 test scores, but they'll be able to see the historical data of all the tests they have taken previously. So it's all stored there. I have a link to the parent portal here. Additionally, we have a bunch of resources on our webpage and on the Cognia Help and Support site to help parents understand their students' test scores, to help them access the parent portal. And we also have a letter template that you guys can use to send home to parents, either physical or digital, helping to explain to parents the purpose of the portal and how to use the portal. All right, so our ELA updates, this one is chocked full of information. The first big thing I wanted to highlight, I mentioned it earlier, is that grade 3 ELA will be online this year. We have moved all of our OSTP and CCRA assessments to be administered primarily online. So grade 3 ELA online. We also have our short constructive response items for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7. Those were field tested in 2019 and we got the data back on them. So now they will be operational, which means that they will count towards the student's score. And the short constructive response item, those are the short answer items. We also have the extended constructive response for grades 5 and 8. That's the essay, the writing prompts, ECR, and some of the things that updates when it comes to the essays are that they can be any of the 3 modes that are listed in our Oklahoma academic standards. That is because we have the 3 modes listed in the standards, and we were informed by the federal government that since all 3 modes are in the standards, all 3 modes need to be assessed, and not just the mode of focus that's listed for grades 5 and 8. Additionally, we have some new writing resources posted to our assessment materials webpage. The essays are scored on a holistic scale of 0 to 4, 4 being the highest. That score is derived in part from the analytic trait rubric. So, ideas in development, organization. It's just a consolidated version of that rubric. However, we have posted, in addition to the analytic rubric, the holistic rubrics that are used in scoring these prompts, as well as some student examples or exemplars of what their actual student responses, what a 4 would look like for a 5th grade informative essay, or what a 2 would look like for an 8th grade argumentative essay. I've linked those here. They're on our webpage, and please share those with all the English educators that you guys know that would find those useful. Next are our math updates. So grade 3 math will also be online. It was slated to be administered online last year, but we received the assessment waiver, so it was not. No tests were online. We didn't have them. Also, our cluster items for math will be operational for all grades. That means, again, that they will count towards the student scores. We also will have technology enhanced items for grades 4 through 8. And a TEI, or technology enhanced, is it's a little more in-depth than a traditional multiple choice. It's going to be on a computer or an iPad where it's a drag and drop or a diagram. It's a little more involved than selecting A, B, C, or D. And those will be field tested for grades 4 and 5. We also have our reference sheets, our formula sheets for grades 6 and 8, grades 6 through 8 math, linked here. They are on our webpage as well as the Cognia Help and Support site. We updated the OSTP calculator policy this year. However, we didn't change any of the policies. It's all remaining the same. It is just that we added some screenshots of what the built-in calculator looks like on the platform for grades 6 through 8 and grade 11. So we added some information to it, but none of the policies and procedures around calculators in the OSTP have changed. The next update is our online readiness tool. So this is not, it doesn't exist to predict students' performance on the OSTP. It's merely there to help students familiarize themselves with the platform so that they become used to how to answer questions, how to navigate between different tabs, different stories, how to use the tools like the highlighter and the pencil. Additionally, all students, when they log on to the online readiness tool, will see an accommodations page that will allow them to try out text-to-speech or color contrast. However, those accommodations will not be available to students who do not have that accommodation marked in a valid IEP 504 or ELAP. But it will be available for everyone to see on the readiness tool. The updates for the readiness tool this year would be that we added a section for grade 3 ELA. Since it was previously not online, now that it is, there is a part to help students become familiar with that, third grade students. Our next topic is the site capacity tool. This is on the Oklahoma Help and Support page, Cognia's page, and it's actually a pretty cool feature. It's for the technology coordinators as you guys are preparing for administering the OSTP online. You would go in and they would enter, how many students will be testing at a time, computers, and all sorts of technical information, and you enter it into the form, and at the bottom it automatically computes what sort of bandwidth will be needed, all the technological requirements to make testing go smoothly in your building. Now to our CCRA grade 11 updates. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about the peer review process. So peer review is when we submit a ton of documents about our testing program to the federal government. And they go through it with a magnifying glass to make sure that we are meeting federal requirements and following ESSA to a T, and they come back with determinations on ways that we are required to improve our testing program. The first one being that when we submitted for this college and career readiness assessment, the ACT and SAT, that they said we have to collect evidence of stakeholder feedback for the ACT. So as a state, our state CCRA assessment is the SAT. However, we have a locally selected option. Districts can choose to administer the ACT. And if you choose to do that, the federal government is saying that there has to be some evidence collected by us that districts have, talked to their school board, their parents, and gotten input on making this choice. We are in the thick of that right now. That evidence was due back to our office on October 1st. If you have any questions about that process or have some information or evidence you need to turn into us, please reach out to us. We are working diligently to get through all of that. And if you need anything about that, you can honestly email me directly because I'm spearheading that effort. The next being our informed consent peer review determination. So this has to do with the pre-bubble, the non-test portion of the test. It's also, I always refer to it as pre-bubbling. And so with that, since this test is required, the federal government has determined that whether you're given the ACT or SAT, if a student participates in that non-test portion, there has to be consent given to participate by a parent or guardian. And this needs to be done before a student completes the non-test portion. We do not need those turned back into us. Those forms, they're posted to our webpage under the College and Career Readiness tab, but they need to be collected and kept at a local level. And then the last thing was for accommodations that the federal government determined that from an equity standpoint, all of the scores received back for the ACT, SAT need to be college reportable. So accommodations need to be approved through the SAT, ACT platforms. If you give an accommodation on an ACT or SAT that is not approved by them, then their score is not college reportable and then no longer becomes valid for us as well. So our required assessments for grade 11, we've talked a bit about this. We've got the SAT or ACT for math and ELA, and that does include the writing portion. We, in addition, have a science content assessment for grade 11. It's roughly half physical science, half life science content. And then we have our US history content assessment for grade 11. It is operational this year. It was given as a field test in 2019, and now that we have the data back, students will receive scores when they take this assessment in 2020. We will have a standard setting process that we will send out applications for history educators to take part in the summer of 2020, so please be on the lookout for those. One question that we often get is the test blueprint shows that it's 50% civics, 50% US history. However, that doesn't mean that there's a set of civic standards that needs to be taught. It all comes from within the Oklahoma academic standards for U.S. history. The civics and U.S. history determination on the blueprint is just a distinction between different objectives. Civics meaning that it's an actual legislation or law, and U.S. history more towards events and occurrences. The U.S. history test is the only test that we give that is not required by the federal government. It is required, however, by Oklahoma state law, and that is why grade 11 students take that one. These next few slides are going to be updates that College Board sent to us. The first being that all of the SATs will be administered online, and that students with an accommodation that's been documented and approved, those are ones that can take a paper pencil test. Additionally, all of the SAT sections need to be completed in one day, unless they have an approved accommodation for extended time. And here is a breakdown of the SAT testing window. It is also posted to the testing calendar that was at the very beginning of the presentation and posted to our webpage. If you are giving the PSAT NMSQT this year, you might want to snap a picture of this chart. It's got some important dates that College Board sent us for those. Give you guys a few minutes, or a few seconds, I mean. And now we have a statement that College Board released about the pandemic and understanding that we're all having to be innovative in the ways that we approach not only assessment, but instruction, and the flexibility is the name of the game when it comes to testing in a pandemic. So if you have any questions about that, please access this link that College Board has put together for their COVID-19 updates. Here is our contact information for our College Board SAT contract. Arlene Williams and Eddie Pulaski, they are wonderful and helpful and would be more than happy to answer any of your questions you have that are SAT related. Also, SAT has a number of resources available for both educators and students, and those are linked here, as well as the testing portal for College Board. Now, ACT. So these next few slides are going to be slides from ACT about updates for the CCRA. This first one is about the ACT window for the grade 11 CCRA. It is also on the schedule that we have posted to our main webpage if you would like to access that. Here are some updates and information from ACT. Previously, if a district has chosen to administer the ACT, they needed to do proctor caching and have that set up before. ACT has determined that that is no longer a requirement to do proctor caching. However, it is still available for peace of mind. The purpose for proctor caching would be in case you have some sort of major outage during the middle of testing. Proctor caching would help save any student responses or test information so that it didn't just disappear. When it comes to administering the ACT online, you can give it on a computer, a laptop, or a Chromebook, but it is still not available for iPads and tablets. That is not something that ACT has developed yet. And they have the 6-day online test window for this year, and that is both for standard testing and accommodated online testing. It's the 6 days at the beginning of April. Another new thing that ACT is doing is success.act.org, and it's ultimately going to be a single sign-on platform for ACT. They're moving towards it. All of their reporting is now on it. So if you want to access any ACT reports, that's where you would go. Additionally, if you need to submit accommodation requests in the TAA system, you now have to have an ACT success.act.org account. So To become a trusted agent, there's a whole process around it. Superintendents were sent a code last year, and that code needs to be accessed and put in to become a trusted agent. If you have questions about this process, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to our contacts at ACT, either Tony Cortez or Greg Labey. They will help step you through the processes of getting an ACT Success account so that you can start submitting those accommodation applications for our ACT that's coming up in April. Additionally, ACT also has a bunch of resources for educators and students, and they have a whole webpage dedicated to the CCRA ACT, and I have those linked on this slide. All right, general programmatic updates.
Hey, come on, Isabel. Oh, okay.
Precode. So Precode this year is on January 8th of 2021. So what Precode is when we as the state pull all of the student information out of the wave into a really big file, and we send it to our testing vendors so it gets put into their portals, so into Cognia or Pearson Access Next or College Board's portal, so that you guys don't have to individually put all of your students into the portal. With Precode, it is important that when this snapshot is taken, when we pull from the wave on January 8th, the information we really need to be correct would be the state testing number, the student's name, the student's birth date, also their EL status, their IEP or 504 status, and their grade level. That's what we really, really need to make sure is correct when the Precode snapshot is taken. There are some rules around Precode. So if whatever grade a student is enrolled in on January 8th, that is the test they will be, grade level test they will be expected to take. So even if you have a student who is in the 3rd grade on January 8th, but then is somehow promoted to the 5th grade in that March, they still will be expected to take the 3rd grade assessment. If a student transfers into your district after the Precode window, we will determine what test they should have taken during the demographic overlay period. That is a data pool that we do towards the end of testing it's similar to Precode, and we pull the student information from the wave towards the end of testing just to ensure that we're getting the cleanest and most correct student data possible. The rules for grade 11 can be a little bit trickier given that promotion and credits and how that works. So, however, it still remains the same that if a student is enrolled in grade 11 on January 8th, they will be expected to participate in the CCRA. If you have someone who transfers in after the Precode window, you will have to manually add them to the Cognia SAT or ACT portal. Also, if you have a student who comes in and they're put in the wrong grade, please do not unenroll them and then re-enroll them. That messes with the wave and the data that we get. So if you could just simply correct it in your local student information system, we would greatly appreciate that. A big thing I would like to note is that seniors this year, 2021 seniors, graduating seniors who received the assessment waiver last year in 2020 when they were juniors, also received an exemption for the state laws that require assessment graduation requirements. So you do not need to add this year's seniors into the CCRA testing window for grade 11. Next, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the demographic overlay. It's something that we do towards the end of the testing window where we pull student information again and student demographics again. More information about this process will be sent out closer to time. The most important thing is to make sure that your student information is correct. So our IEP and 504 accommodations manuals, I've linked them to this page that have all of our manuals and accommodation documents. So this year we made some minor revisions and formatting changes, but it's nothing too crazy. It's just to help make them more accessible. For example, if you are looking at a certain accommodation and it says see page 15 for scribe information, instead of having to scroll to page 15, now you can just click on it and it'll take you straight to page 15. Some of the more substantial changes that were made, I've highlighted here. All assessments being online, that's the big one. So now to get a paper pencil test, that has to be a documented accommodation. So paper tests and braille tests and large print tests are still available. It just has to be documented in a student's IEP or 504 plan. These same changes were made for our EL accommodations manual about the inter-document hyperlinks to, improve readability. Additionally, on this page, we have a translation accommodation resource, Spanish translation accommodations resource posted. And what it would help to do would be if you have a student and you know that they need a Spanish test and Spanish text to speech, it would flow down and help you with the steps on how to get that test versus a English test form with Spanish audio files or an English test form with English text to speech. We also have electronic Spanish parent student teacher guides available. That's the PSTGs that you could download and send out to your parents who are Spanish speakers. Some of the major updates we made to the EL manual would be that no EL students are exempt from participating in the OSTP. Everybody has to participate, and that's per federal law. And we also updated information in terms of administration modes that we talked about. Since everything is online, that kind of changes how tests can be given. This is more information on that. It comes directly from the manual for what tests are available for what subjects when it comes to EL accommodations. There are still large print Spanish forms that are available. However, they need to be requested through UCELI FRER. She is our ELPA specialist. Additionally, she is the go-to when it comes to EL accommodations. I know when I was a DTC, I spent a lot of time talking to UCELI. She knows all the answers and she can really help clarify any questions you have when it comes to EL accommodations. Next, we have updates for our training modules. So test administrators and test proctors still have to be trained before they can ever administer or proctor a test. If somebody participates and completes the test administrator module and passes the quiz with a pass rate of 80% or greater, that would certify them to be both a TA and a TP. And then the TP module, the test proctor module, if somebody completes that, then they would be trained to be a test proctor only. So if you're a test administrator and you take the test administrator module, you do not have to go back and then take the test proctor module. The TA module covers training for both TA and TP duties. We also updated our test proctor ratios, student to test proctor ratios. For every 50 students for computer testing, 1 test proctor is needed. And then for every 35 students for paper testing, 1 test proctor is needed. Another update being that we have our required district test coordinator trainings every year in February. And just like these updates, sadly, due to the pandemic, they need to be virtual this year. I know that virtual isn't as fun or engaging, and we're sad that we won't be able to come around the state and see you all in person, but safety first. So these trainings will be held in February. More information about them and signing up for them will be to come in our Gov delivery email from the Office of Assessments. So that pretty much wraps up all of the information that I have to talk about, which I know is a lot. This page has the contact information for our office. Please reach out to us, call us, email us if you have any questions. It is what we are here for. So now I'm going to look at the chat and see if anyone has any questions that have come up. I know that Christy, our Executive Director of State Assessments, has been on and answering questions as we go along. All right. Do you guys see any questions that I have missed thus far? Do we manually add students who come past the pre-code date for grades 3 through 8? Yes, Wendy. All right.
What are cluster items is the one I see.
Cluster items, so that would be where you have a stimulus or a passage or a graph, and then you have multiple questions that go back to that information. And so that information would remain on the page as they would click through the questions associated with that information.
And will this training PowerPoint be posted on the assessment and accountability?
Absolutely. We will post this training either this week or next week as a video recording of it, as well as the slides that are hyperlinked.
If visitors aren't allowed in the buildings because of COVID, you see the requirements of having proctors changing.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christy didn't.
And Christy has that. I do want to say that, you know, with the understanding of, you know, COVID-19 and administering the OSTP in light of a pandemic, we are looking to later this month send out a survey to district test coordinators that ask about the potential to administer tests on nights and weekends, since the State Board of Education approved nights and weekends as instructional time this past summer, to see if that is something that districts would want to utilize. And then in this winter, we are going to be releasing some guidance surrounding the administering the OSTP during a pandemic and COVID in light of CDC guidelines. The reason why we haven't put that out yet is because, as you guys know, things are changing daily, and we don't want to prematurely come out and say a bunch of stuff and then something changes and we say, oh, forget that. Here's actually what needs to happen. So there will be guidance coming out around that later this winter.
And Sarah, I just unmuted myself. I'm Christy McCreary, the Executive Director of State Assessments, and I wanted to chime in. We had a question about provisions in place or guidelines on how to handle students if their parents choose not to risk an in-person test administration. And the question is, do we file a medical waiver for those students? For that situation, you would not file a medical waiver. A medical waiver is not supported in law by a situation where the parent is not comfortable with students coming in. Those have to be supported by medical documentation. So if you have, say you have a student who comes down with COVID and is under doctor's care, and the doctor prohibits the student from returning to school during the entirety of the testing window, that student would qualify for a medical exemption. But just keeping the student at home or quarantining the student for 2 weeks, those situations would not qualify for a medical exemption. However, we are working currently with leadership to, as Sarah mentioned, put forth guidance, very detailed guidance, to assist you with the testing window, because even though in a perfect world we would have a traditional testing window, 2020 has proven itself time and time again that we are not in a perfect world, and things are changing on a daily basis, as you are very well familiar with at the district level. And so we will not be releasing this guidance until this winter, when, just to give things a few more months so that we can give you the most up-to-date guidance we have. But we will be releasing guidance that has every situation that we can think of. We will be reaching out to district test coordinators to come up with situations that we haven't thought of, because even though we do our best to try to think of every situation that comes across, we are looking at things from a different lens than you are. And so both perspectives are equally valuable in putting forth this guidance. So as Sarah mentioned, we will be reaching out to you. We are working on this guidance. We have no intention of requesting a statewide assessment waiver. It has been made clear to us from the United States Department of Education that they will not be granting statewide assessment waivers. But I do want to emphasize statewide, because there are other waivers that may be appropriate that we may be requesting, but we really need to give it a little bit more time just to see what happens so that we can do what is most appropriate for that time, since things seem to be changing on, you know, not only a weekly, but even a daily sometimes basis here in Oklahoma. And so there certainly may be other waivers required or requested and approved, but I really can't speak to what those would consist of at this time, simply because we're building this airplane as we're flying it. And but I do want you to be aware that we are making plans to mitigate any issues that COVID may bring forth, and we are well aware that COVID will play a role in our testing window that we need to be prepared for. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that you knew exactly what we're doing, and just rest assured that we will provide more guidance, and we will be reaching out to you for your thoughts and opinions as we put that guidance together.
Christy, I'm seeing a question. Will students who are enrolled in our district's virtual academy need to come into the sites for OSTP administration?
Yes, as it is currently, all districts, whether they are virtual districts or brick and mortar districts, must allow some sort of facility for students to come in and test in person. And that is true whether you have virtual students regularly or virtual students for COVID. You will need to bring those students in for testing.
And then Dixie wanted to clarify her question. If a student comes out of the country late in the test, comes from out of country late in the testing window, do we allow them, do we have to allow them to come into the school to test? We are currently asking some to quarantine for 14 days.
At this time, the answer is yes, but that is definitely something that we need to clarify and discuss more when we're putting that guidance together. So thank you very much, Dixie, for that question. Yeah, I'm going to copy and paste it into another document for safekeeping.
I think that's going to be a guidance bullet.
Mm-hmm.